Hello, welcome to Dial a Teacher. My name is Dimit Keith, and tonight we have a very special question for you. We had a student call in, and her name is Mary. She's in the 10th grade, and her question is whether or not snakes have a stinger in their mouth, which is their tongue. And we want to show you a snake and its tongue, and then I'm going to discuss the snake. All right, this is a snake called Babe. I don't know if she's going to stick her tongue out for us right now, but her tongue is her ability to smell. She will flick the tongue out. Sometimes if she smells something interesting like a Tic Tac in your mouth, they'll stick their tongue out. There it goes. Okay. They flick it out into the air to sense any little particles there, just as when we smell some cookies baking in the oven, we'll sniff in order to get a whiff of them. When snakes flick their tongue out, they drag the particles back into their mouth, and it rubs across an organ that picks up these chemicals, and then they can detect what it is. Hopefully, for the snake, it'll be something that they want to eat. But they also use this to locate others of their species and familiar territory. Now, we wanted to bring a live snake in so that you could see it rather than just a picture of a snake or the word snake, because many people have something we call ophiophobia. I've written the word on the board. Let me move over so you can see it. And it's really a word made of two parts. Ophi, which means snake, and phobia, which means fear of. And an awful lot of people have an irrational fear of these rather interesting animals. The more we know about an animal, the less we have to fear about them. As you can see, this animal is not harming me at all, and it's very docile, very comfortable being held. She knows she's in no danger, and I'm certainly in no danger either. These make excellent pets. This one is about 7 years old. It's a rosy boa, and she's really in beautiful condition. You can see the darker colors on her tail section, and her body is really a very nice size through here. She's very well fed. She's curious also. Now, some of the things that Mary was curious about besides this stinger, which is not a stinger in the mouth, they do have teeth, of course, but the tongue is just a sensory organ to bring in sense of smell. Now, snakes are have a beautiful covering on their body, and many people think they're slimy because they're sort of slick looking. But these scales are really very, very smooth. And she's a little ticklish. And these scales are going to be shed. She's going to remove them every time she grows. Where you want to go? She wants to go up on my head. Okay, she may shed her skin about once a month, and the pretty colored part doesn't come off, but a thin tissue of skin will come off, starting with her nose, and she'll try to rub against a rock, and it'll peel off like taking off a sock, and the entire skin will come off all the way down to her tail, and then you'll have an extra skin laying there on the inner cage. Okay, she's sort of exploring my hair. One of the neat things about this skin is that you can see every scale on her body in that skin, even the covering of her eye. Because snakes don't have any eyelids at all, but they have a little thin scale that covers their eye, and when they shed them, when they shed the entire skin, this comes off as well. So snakes become blue-eyed just before they shed, sort of a gray covering. Now, on the underside of snakes, their scales are shaped a little differently. They're usually like little flat bars. So as they move across the ground, these flat bars dig into the sand and give them a little traction, just like good tires. They have to have an ability to push. They don't have the legs that a lizard would have, so their scales are actually designed to give them a little push. Now, these animals are cold-blooded. Right now, in the lights of the studio, she's warm, and she's a little more active than she would be. In the wintertime, if she gets chilled, she won't move at all. And they don't eat either very often in the wintertime. Their metabolism, unlike yours, which you're hungry rather frequently, and you have to eat at least 3 times a day, and if you're a youngster, probably more. She can go for a week easily on just one meal, but there are many snakes that can go for 4 months, maybe even 5 months, especially during the winter time. Now their range across the world is limited. They don't do well in areas in which the ground freezes solid, so you don't find them in northern Canada. They're found only up into the very bottom, lower parts of Canada, down into, of course, Florida and the warmer climates. They are limited by their cold-bloodedness. Now, since they don't eat much and they don't burn their fuel very much, they can hold their breath and not use much oxygen for a long time. Right now, I can hear her breathing. She's got like a little congestion or something in her nose. You can hear her sort of hiss, but she's not hissing to threaten. She's just breathing, and I can sort of hear it. I don't know if you can hear the sound also next to the mic. Maybe you can pick it up. One of the neat things about this animal, many students ask me, how can these things breathe when they're eating a large meal? Because they do eat rats. And the rat can be very big around. You can see how narrow her neck is. Okay? She's got a very skinny little neck and a very small mouth. But this thing will stretch tremendously so that she can accommodate a very large meal. Snakes never take chunks out of their food and bite it and chew their food like you're told to do. These things have to eat the whole meal or they don't get anything. They have to swallow the entire thing. So their body, their neck region has to enlarge tremendously, and it will expand as large as the rat with no problem. And of course their jaw is hinged differently than yours, and they can expand so that they can accommodate this big meal. Now they also have a rather interesting lung design, so that they have a section that absorbs oxygen, and then they have a sac behind that that just stores air. If they are almost choking on their meal, they still have a large oxygen supply that they can rely on in that back part of the lung, and they really are not in any danger. Now these things are, they reproduce 2 ways, the 2 types of production of young. They may lay eggs. This particular type does not, but many snakes lay eggs in a nest and then abandon them. This one will retain the babies inside until they are ready to hatch, and so that would be oviviviparous. Snakes that lay the eggs would be oviparous. Now she's moving around this way. I want you to get a good look at her face here. Come on. Here you go. I don't know if you can see her. Okay. Their skeleton is rather interesting. It's really quite different from yours. You have a relatively few ribs. You have 2 pairs of limbs. You have your arms and your legs. So you really don't need very many ribs in order to support your body. Whereas a snake is made up of a tremendous number of ribs all the way down their body. So you really have to be very careful in handling snakes. You don't want to ever grab them, press them too hard. You can break some of these ribs, and they may prevent these large meals from going down. So you have to be very careful not to harm them. There are a number of types of boas that have an additional piece to the skeleton, and that piece would be some hip bones that are embedded in the skeleton. So even though snakes do not have hind limbs, they actually have remnants of these limbs in the skeleton. In this skeleton you can actually see all these mini ribs from the head end all the way to the tail. It's quite an interesting creature. Thank you, Mary, for calling in with your question. Now we have another question, and this one is from Carrie Louise. And Carrie Louise wants to know about a difficult term, thermocline. Now the word she's interested in is thermocline. And we can break the word down, Carrie, in order to see that this part means heat. And cline indicates a sudden change or a quick change a big change in temperature with a small change in distance. Now let me give an example to help you understand this half of it. In the case of a thermocline in a lake, for example, here in Dade County, this is a very common phenomenon. If you have a lake, here's the surface of the lake. The water will heat up here on the surface during the summertime. Now warm things tend to move upward. Let me write it larger so you can see. Warm things move upward and cold things move downward. So that after a short period of time, after the summer has been heating this water and the warm water keeps rising, cold water keeps sinking, you get a definite layer right across between the two. If you're swimming in a lake and it has a thermocline, and they all will have these after about July, when you swim down to this layer and put your hand into this region, it is just like ice water. It is perfectly cold, and it is not going to come up and mix with this at all, because warm water is less dense and cold water is more dense. So because of the difference in density, they will maintain their positions until winter comes and the top layer begins to chill. Now related to this, Carrie, is one other concept. Now this is a much bigger word. Has the same ending but the front end is a mouthful, pycnocline. This end means difference in density. A thermocline is actually a type of pycnocline because these areas of water here are different densities. But a pycnocline can also happen with water that has salt, high concentration of salt, or fresh water. Fresh water would float on top, and you would get a layer difference between the salt water, which is much denser, at the bottom. These may segregate themselves with a line between them that you can actually see. If you have an aquarium or if you have a dish or a glass and you want to try this, make some very salty water and then carefully layer some fresh water on top. If you pour it too quickly, it will mix, but if you layer it very carefully, you'll get a line right between the two, and that line is called a pycnocline. Now these actually occur naturally, and these occur in a river system where the river is flowing. Let me show you here. Well, here's the surface of the river. Here's the bottom of the river. The water is flowing this direction. This is all fresh. The sea and the tides will slide in here. This is heavier water, more dense, so it will go underneath, and the fresh will slide right out on top. And you'll have like a little layer of fresh water at the mouth of a river before it mixes with the sea, especially if the water is very quiet and you don't have a lot of turbulence. Now we thank you, Carrie Louise, for your question. This is thermocline and pycnoclines are very common problems for students because they're difficult to understand. So we appreciate you calling with this question. If any of the others of you have questions, we'd really like for you to ask your questions of us. We want to explain them on the air. So any of you, if you want to, please call Dial a Teacher. And I think we have a phone call now. Hello?
Hello. My name is Monique, and I'm in the 8th grade, and I was wondering if you could answer a question for me about bioluminescent animals.
All right. Let me write your name on the board.
Okay.
Is it M-O-N-I-Q-U-E?
Yes.
And you're an 8th grader?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now, what would you like to know about these animals?
Could you please tell me about the bioluminescent animals?